Hi, everyone. Welcome to this evening's SENS Wellness Webinar. And I am Susan Greeley. I'm the National Director of Wellness Services at Castle Connolly Private Health Partners. So I'm going to take about a minute to give participants time to join us to log in here this evening. And while we're doing that, I'll go over just a few details about tonight's webinar before we get started. So there will be a Q&A at the end of tonight's presentation, and I really encourage you all to ask any questions that you would like. So you can submit those in the Q&A section versus the chat. So I'll try to see both. I'll be monitoring both, but in general, do use the Q&A section. And we will be recording tonight's webinar, or we are recording it, as we do with all of our webinars. We'll send out the recording with the slides from tonight's presentation and some additional wellness offers via email to all members. So do look out for that over the next few days. Okay, so letting people logging in, and for those who may be joining for the first time, I like to tell everyone that our SENS Wellness webinars are intended to educate and support all of our members, as it is my goal to truly inspire and empower all of you to make positive lifestyle choices on a daily basis and really support your overall health and well-being. So again, thank you for joining me tonight. I think we'll go ahead and get started for this first SENS Wellness webinar of the year on surprising and hidden factors impacting your sleep. So once again, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. I am Susan Greeley, the National Director of Wellness Services here at Castle Connolly Private Health Partners. So, okay, welcome to January 2022, which is hard to believe. This is our first wellness webinar of the new year, and I'm very excited to get started in hopes of helping many of you who may be struggling with sleep. That has been an issue for very many people since the start of the pandemic, obviously beforehand as well. And I hope you find that there are some subtle and surprising behaviors or thoughts or habits you might have that are impacting your sleep. So I want to start by giving you some background on tonight's presenter. She believes that we can achieve optimal health by tapping into the powerful information that the body-mind connection gives us. So our speaker tonight is Karol Ward. And Karol is a licensed clinical social worker. She is a confidence coach and trained therapist and a TEDx speaker and author. Karol has appeared as a confidence and psychological expert on CNN, Fox News, ABC, NBC, Oprah.com, and along with other digital media outlets, podcasts, and radio shows. So I'm very excited to welcome Karol to join us tonight. You can also find out more about her on her website at karolward.com, and Karol is spelled K-A-R-O-L, karolward.com. So Karol, thank you very, very much for being here tonight. I'm really excited to get this webinar going.
Thank you, Susan. It's really nice to see you again. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you.
I wanted to get into right away one of the most surprising things that I've discovered about sleep over the past couple of years, and I think it's been intensified recently. And that is something that people share with me all the time. And that first surprising factor is exhaustion does not equal sleep. Now, I don't know about you, but over the past years, and anytime I asked someone how they were doing, they answered in two ways. They usually said, I'm so busy. And then the next thing they would say is, and I'm exhausted. And their busyness did not necessarily help them sleep at night. In fact, the kind of exhaustion that they were talking about was the kind of exhaustion that most of us are feeling these days, which is that tired yet wired feeling, where you are so adrenalized all the time due to stress and some of the other things that we're going to talk about in this webinar, that you can't wind down, you can't relax enough to fall into a deep sleep. So we're going to look at some of those things. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the triggers that are affecting us, like this one called a pandemic. The pandemic is definitely across the board affecting sleep. I'm reading about it in the news. You can see it posted in many different places, the stress of the pandemic is causing a lot of sleep issues. And then besides the pandemic, we have the normal issues that cause us to lie awake at night. It could be finances, it could be our health, it could be relationships, stresses in caretaking and caregiving. And it also could be any change that we're experiencing. I mean, many people during this time period made major changes in their life and experienced major changes, whether they moved, whether they started working remotely, whether they had to then give up a certain job, whether they had children at home all of a sudden. All of these changes are triggers that affect our sleep. Now, when it comes to sleep, this first area, sleep hygiene, is often talked about, and there's been a lot written about it. And I'm not going to go into this area tonight, but sleep hygiene basically has to do with the routines and systems that you put in place to help you fall asleep at night. Some of you may be familiar with them. That could be shutting off your phone, or going to bed at the same time, or making sure the temperature in your room is cool and the room is dark. All of these are very, very beneficial. The second area that often comes up when people talk about or are having trouble with sleep has to do with what I call health choices. These are choices in terms of exercise, nutrition. And I threw medication into this category because often medications have ongoing side effects that cause rebound insomnia. And I think it's very, very important that if you are taking medications, that you check in with your doctor and see if there are any side effects to make sure that that's not affecting your sleep, and then to make adjustments as necessary. And like I said, I'm not going to go into these two categories. I believe that you can find out a lot of great information from the health coaches at Castle Connolly or the doctors associated with Castle Connolly. They're going to be able to give you a lot of rich information in these two areas. But the area that I am going to focus on has to do with behavior. The behavior that we are maybe unintentionally involved in that causes us to struggle with our sleep. And that leads me to the second surprising factor about sleep, which has to do with overgiving. This behavior, overgiving, I've seen time and time again affect people's sleep. And I'll share an example of overgiving because often it's something that we feel we are doing because we want to help other people out, but it actually costs us our own sleep and it costs us our health over time. So a good friend of mine, a couple of years ago, she and I met for coffee and I asked her how she was doing. And she said, "Oh, Karol, I am volunteering at my kids' school for the silent auction for the PTA." She said, "This is the second year I've done it. They liked how well I organized it last year, so they asked me to come back." And she said that phrase, "I'm exhausted." She said, "It's like a second job. I don't have time to exercise. I don't have time to get into the creative writing that I want to do because I gave my time to this endeavor." And I said, "Why do you think you did it?" And she said, "Frankly, guilt. I felt guilty. I felt like I should." So as soon as that should word shows up, it's often a word that if you want to slow down and stop overgiving, to examine why you are shoulding, why you are doing things you feel you should, rather than doing things that are going to support your life. And we laughed because she said, when they first ask you to do something and you say yes, there's that moment of, oh, they're so grateful and happy and thrilled that you're giving your time, but then you actually have to put in the time and effort. And that's when she started to get worn out. Now, I'm not saying that you can never give your time. There are opportunities to volunteer in situations where you want to. But the question to ask is this the right time for you to be giving your time? Do you really have the bandwidth? It doesn't mean you can't give your time in the future, but is this the right time for you to be giving emotional support, or actually giving away your time to support someone else's cause? So overgiving, which again exhausts us, is a way that we can start to erode our ability to sleep. The next area, the next surprising factor, has to do with overdoing, which is similar to overgiving, but actually has to do with things that we take on rather than things that we give away. Now, when I talk about overdoing, this can be both in work, this could also be in health and how we take care of ourselves. So here's two examples. I actually do a lot of coaching for corporate attorneys who have demanding jobs like many of us do. And they have a lot of work that gets asked of them, put on their plate. And in my coaching work with them, there's a lot of discussion on how they can stop overdoing, filling up their schedules by at least sharing that there's too much on their plate. It doesn't mean the work will stop. It doesn't mean we always have the perfect opportunity to say no, but communicating that we're overdoing, that our plate is too full, is a very important thing to help us move from that state of always being adrenalized, always being on, always having our sympathetic nervous system be activated. Another example I talk about is I had a client many years ago who used to take care of her health by running 3 miles 4 days a week. She loved it. She felt terrific. But then she had her first child, and she kept trying to do this thing that was good for her by forcing herself out to run. And when we sat down to talk about it, she said, I can't seem to do it. What's wrong with me? Now, many of you might be going, you just had a baby. But for her, she was trying to override her system. She was trying to overdo because she thought it was a good, healthy thing to do. And as we talked it through, we worked on a strategy by having her tune into her body about what actually would be a better choice for her with now that the fact she had a baby. And she ended up not overdoing, but choosing an activity that allowed her to walk at first with a running stroller a half a mile a day. And then she built up from there. So when it comes to overdoing and overgiving, they're very much tied in. But again, the way to distinguish them is overgiving is energy going out, overdoing is energy coming in. It's always good to check in with yourself and to see if your circumstances allow you to give in the way that you want to. And we're going to talk about some strategies to address that. But that is a great starting point. Is my life set up today to be able to give and do the way that I used to? And if it's not, and my sleep is suffering, it's time to make an adjustment. Now, overgiving and overdoing affects us in 3 major ways. It affects us emotionally, it affects us mentally, and it affects us physically. And we're going to take a look at the symptoms that start to occur when you've been overgiving and overdoing, and in general, handling a lot of stress the way we all are doing these days. So here we look at the emotional symptoms. First one being irritability. If you find yourself feeling irritable and cranky, it usually means, if you aren't getting enough sleep, that you're doing too much, that your body is stressed and your mind is feeling agitated and worn down. You might find yourself crying. You might be experiencing meltdowns. And I'm going to pause on meltdowns for a moment, because I know we've all seen in the news how people are melting down all over the place. When I speak about meltdowns, I mean emotionally having reactions to being asked to wear a mask, to having to wait in line, and having these big, big reactions to these requests. or these delays. And from my perspective as a therapist, I feel that it's because when the pandemic occurred, we all had to make an adjustment very rapidly. We had to change the way we worked. We had to change the way our routines, the way we ordered food, the way we interacted with people. We had to change how people in our household, children might be learning at home. We might be bringing caretaking responsibilities for parents. All of those things changed very, very quickly, and we made an adjustment in order to survive. But all the emotions about the pandemic and the ways that we had to make adjustments had to be put to the side. They had to be compartmentalized. And I look at it like a dam. We put up a dam in order to handle the very real things that were going on in our lives. But over time, I feel that emotional dam has started to get cracks in it. And eventually, when the situation or the encounter is right, all the emotions that have been held back become built up and they push through. So when you are on hold for 20 minutes and someone gets on to help you, and all of a sudden you have a reaction to it, and you have a huge reaction, that means the backlog of emotions that have been put to the side are taking that opportunity to come out. And that's why you see people fighting, and that's why you see people reacting. So you don't want to be overdoing and overgiving on top of that, but these are why meltdowns are happening more and more. Other things you might experience are anxiety, a feeling of being on edge all the time. Again, a lot of that's due to the pandemic and our changed circumstances. But if we are overextending in any way, we are going to find ourselves in an anxious state. And finally, depression is a symptom that we are wearing ourselves out. Now, there's a distinction with depression. There's something called clinical depression, which is an ongoing state or mood that has episodes to it. It's something that occurs most of the time and is something that is addressed through therapy, counseling, sometimes medication. And then there's something called situational depression, which is what a majority of people are experiencing maybe for the first time in their lives. And that's an outside-in situation. The pandemic's impact on us is causing us to feel situationally depressed because we can't do the things that we have wanted to. That can also occur if you are overgiving and overdoing. You wear yourself out. But if you address those two areas, that depression usually lifts. The next area has to do with the physical symptoms of those hidden factors and surprising factors of sleep. The main one being insomnia. When we are expending too much energy and not focusing in on what we need and what our circumstances are, our sleep is going to be affected. You might also find yourself with these stomach aches, odd aches and pains. You could have headaches. You could have shortness of breath. You could have muscle tension. All of a sudden, you're walking around with your shoulders up to your ears because, again, there's this inability to allow yourself to relax. I went to see my dentist recently, and he said, I can't tell you, Karol, how many people who've been coming to see me and they've been grinding their teeth and experiencing jaw tension because of stress. The body is very, very smart and sends us signals all the time. And sometimes it's through pain. And if we look at what is trying to be expressed to us, we can then address those things and help ourselves get into a healthier state of mind and body. In the mental area, the symptoms that you might notice are difficulty concentrating, feeling forgetful, feeling pessimistic. And this one, which is a big one, rumination. When you are overtired and wired, and there's not enough of the body's ability to calm down and relax, you might find yourself ruminating over the same things over and over again. And so it's a good thing to start to learn some techniques to help your body and mind relax, to help you move away from the overgiving and overdoing, and to be able to move into a state of more relaxation. So let's talk about some of those strategies. The first one is about setting boundaries. The second one is about calming your body. And the third one is about easing your mind. Let's talk about boundaries, because this is often something that people struggle with, and it shows up in surprising ways. When it comes to setting boundaries, I'm talking about focusing on putting boundaries around your time to the best of your ability. It also, from my perspective, means putting boundaries around social media, and putting boundaries around wherever you get your news, and boundaries around any devices that you use, and boundaries around people. Now, I want to be very clear about this. I am not of the school where I say you can never go on Facebook, or you should never watch the news, or you should never be in touch with people, or being on your phone is too much and not a good thing. Well, I think actually, and I've seen it with my clients, people are on their phone more these days because they're looking for connection. They want to feel the kind of connection they used to feel when they were out and about in the world. So being on their phone is one way to feel that connection. All of these things on this slide are perfectly fine to do. But what I want to ask you to start paying attention to is when your mood shifts. If you start out scrolling on Facebook and you're in a great mood, and then all of a sudden, as you look at people's posts and how they're living their lives and how well they seem to be doing during the pandemic, and your mood changes, it's time to get off Facebook or any social media platform that you're on. If you're watching the news and you enjoy getting updates and you want to remain current, perfectly fine. But when you find yourself yelling back at the television or getting agitated from watching the news, I recommend that you turn off the news for a while. If you're on your phone and you find your mood again shifting, or you find yourself feeling blah and unmotivated, maybe again it's time for you to put down your phone and see if you can give yourself something else, some other kind of stimulation or connection. And the same with people. If you've finally carved out a moment for yourself, and then you get a text from a good friend saying, "Can you talk?" I want you to simply sit there and think, is this the right time for me to talk? Is it going to help me to take on this conversation? And in order to figure that out, I have some boundary thoughts for you to consider. So the first one is, does it work for me when you are given a request for something? Whenever I put this up, I have people say to me, wait a minute. I can't say, does it work for me when I need to feed my baby or walk my dog or turn in a project at work? And I understand that. I'm not saying that you would say that to those situations. But except for the bottom line responsibilities, and you all know what those are, does it work for you when it comes to boundaries to allow your time and energy to be eaten away by things that don't support you right now? Very, very important to consider whenever you imagine giving or doing things that you haven't planned for. The second thing to think about, and this is an interesting one, is just because I can do it doesn't mean I want to do it. This particular phrase really startles people. I worked with a client who is a caretaker for an elderly parent. And she told me that her computer had broken. She had to order a part. And in order to get that part, she had to go drive and get it. And as we were talking about how she could take care of herself during this very stressful time of caretaking, she said to me, I could go tomorrow. It's a half-hour drive. I'm exhausted, but I guess I should just push through because, I can do it. And I said, well, Is there another time that you can go? And she said, well, I could go on Monday, but then who knows what the traffic is going to be like? I mean, it's a half-hour drive. And that's when I said to her, just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should be doing this, wanting to do this. Maybe it's better to face a little bit heavier traffic on Monday when you're more rested than push yourself through an activity just because you know how. And going back to my friend who volunteered for the PTA, she's great at organizational skills. In her mind, she's thinking, oh, what's the big deal? Something I know how to do very well. But just because you know how to do it well doesn't mean you should be doing it at that time. You might be a great editor. You might be someone who's great at accounting, but is it the time for you to help everyone else out? Just because you can doesn't mean that you want to, or I'm going to add the phrase, or should at this time. Because here's the other question I want you to think about. What's the ripple effect if you do? Sure, it might be something that you think you could do because you're skilled at it, but how does it impact you afterwards? How will any of those activities that you can do easily, but you hadn't planned for, what's the ripple effect? If you give away your time to listen to a friend who's going through a problem, it's not an emergency, but she just wants to talk, how is the ripple effect of that conversation going to affect the rest of your day? You just might not have it to give. So keep thinking, what's the ripple effect if I say yes to something that's seemingly something I could do very easily? There's usually a cost to it. The next technique that I mentioned was calming your body. Besides setting boundaries, it's a good idea in order to help yourself sleep before you even practice sleep hygiene, though some of these things may be part of sleep hygiene, is to figure out ways to calm your body. And one of the ways that is easy and quick to do is taking breaks in your day. Again, when I bring this up to people, I do get pushback, and people say to me, I don't have any time for breaks in the day. And I'd usually say, really? You couldn't take 5 minutes to sit down and catch your breath, or take 5 minutes to eat lunch and move away from the computer, or 5 minutes to sit down and watch something or read something. It only takes 5 minutes to get the behavior started. And what it does, it allows your nervous system to calm down from being in that adrenalized state. I don't know about you, but most of my stimulation these days, besides the people living in my house, comes through the work that I'm doing. In the past, I'd be out, I'd be doing other things, but right now my energy, the way that I'm being mentally stimulated, is through work. But it's a false kind of stimulation. It actually starts to drain you after a while. And if you can take small breaks throughout the day, whether you're working or not, and let your body and your nervous system calm down, that's going to help you later on when it's time for sleep. The other thing is, and this is not about me giving advice about exercise, but allowing yourself to move your body when you are feeling a particular emotional state. So, for example, I find that when people are in angry, agitated, upset states of mind, that doing an activity that's more vigorous helps them discharge that energy. And that could be something like taking a brisk walk, it could be running, it could be doing jumping jacks. That helps discharge the energy. And on the other hand, when people are feeling vulnerable, or they're feeling sad or blue or melancholy, I often recommend doing movement that nurtures the body in a different way. And that could be stretching, that could be yoga, that could be taking a slow, gentle walk. So it's allowing the body to move, but not forcing it to move if you're feeling vulnerable. I remember, again, years ago, I was working with a client of mine who was going through a painful separation from someone. And she was feeling agitated. And she said to me, Karol, everyone keeps telling me to do yoga. They're telling me that I should do yoga and that'll help me calm down and feel serene. Well, I don't feel like doing yoga. And I said, okay, you don't have to. But what kind of activity do you think would help you calm down your body? And she thought for a moment and she said, kickboxing. I really want to do something vigorous. I'm not feeling serene right now. And I said, go for it. And she did. And she was able to calm down her body. So we don't always have to calm down to calm down. Sometimes we do things to expend energy, and that will move us into a calmer state of mind. So agitation, aerobic, sadness, melancholiness, do some gentle kind of moving. The other strategy is something to ease your mind. And what I recommend to help you ease your mind, and it ties back into taking breaks, is establishing something I call protected time. Protected time can be any amount of time that you choose, but these are the important things to remember. It's not a time for catching up on tasks. The time is not given away to other people unless it's an emergency, and you can often find it through stolen time. So let me just talk about these for a moment. When I say you can choose the amount of time, sometimes it'll be 5 minutes, sometimes it'll be a half hour, but you protect that time. You don't allow anything to interfere with it. And when I say don't use it for doing tasks or your to-do list, what I mean by that is sometimes people will have a break and they'll be like, good, now I can do this thing and this thing and this thing, and they end up keeping themselves in an agitated state. The only caveat for that is if you think that doing things and getting things off your checklist is actually going to help you calm down and create a break for you later on, by all means, go ahead and do that. But if not, try not to fill that time up with yet more activity. Again, you don't want to give that time away to anybody else unless it's an emergency. I used the example before. Maybe you're sitting down for the first time in your day. You've made yourself a cup of tea or cocoa, whatever it is, and you get a text from a friend saying, hey, can you talk? And your automatic habit, your automatic response is, well, I'm sitting down, why not? But keep checking in. Maybe it's not the time. You need that protected time and that break to allow your nervous system to calm down and your brain to unwind. And finally, when I talk about stolen time, this is a great way to grab protected time. Stolen times are when that meeting ends a little bit early and you're in the bedroom and everyone else is in the other room and they think you're going to be in there for another 15 minutes, and you allow yourself to remain in the bedroom and you shut off the computer and you just take some time for yourself. That can be protected time. Or if you have an appointment, you have a doctor's or dentist appointment and it ends early, allow yourself to take some time as you're leaving. Maybe sit down outside if it's warm enough. Or maybe if you're driving, you take the long way home so that you can relax more. You don't have to rush to the next thing. So look for stolen time, those unexpected moments where time opens up, and don't give it away. Again, this will help calm your body, and you again can help yourself relax into sleep later on at night. And here's some suggestions for protected time. These are only suggestions, but some people in protected time, they pray, they meditate, they do inspirational reading, they listen to music, they listen to podcasts, or they do absolutely nothing. My husband often finds me sitting on the couch when I have a break, staring out the window, just allowing my mind to decompress and letting myself calm down from my very busy day. So you can do absolutely nothing. It doesn't have to be a good for you activity, meaning like the other ones I've mentioned, but certainly turn to those if you feel that they would be helpful. So with our pyramid today, as a reminder, the two top pieces of the pyramid are very, very important. And again, you can address them with health practitioners that you trust. But I find that this behavior piece, what lies beneath the things that we do throughout our day, throughout our week or month, and our lives that have to do with overgiving and overdoing, can affect the other two. Because if you are calmer and more relaxed, then you are going to be able to choose the food or do the exercise that makes you feel incredible. And you're also going to be able to concentrate and implement some of the sleep hygiene techniques because you're not overwhelmed. You're not just exhausted all the time. The difficulty concentrating or remembering will come back online as you address the behaviors that lie beneath. So in this webinar, we took a look at behavior. We looked at overgiving and overdoing as two culprits that affect sleep. We looked at the symptoms in the areas of emotional, physical, and mental symptoms. And then we also looked at 3 strategies to help with those kinds of symptoms, which are setting boundaries, calming the body, and easing the mind. Finally, if you're feeling overwhelmed on how to even get started, how to even find the time, or how to set yourself up to take that protected time to put it into place, I'm giving everyone who is on this webinar a free gift from me. It's a 5-minute audio download. It's set to very soothing music, and it combines breathing and some isometric exercises, very gentle pressing and releasing of your fingers. It takes 5 minutes. It's a way to get you started, because I always say one of the most powerful things that you could do for yourself is to sit down for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. And you'll find that your body will appreciate it, your mind will appreciate it, and that will have a ripple effect to how you fall asleep. It's been a real pleasure to be with all of you, and I look forward to connecting with you in the future.
Karol, thank you. Thank you. I think you need to, or I need to call you when I'm having trouble sleeping so I can just listen to your voice. You have the most calming voice. I'll just say that. Thank you. Yeah. And I actually had a big smile on my face when you were talking about the protected time, and you said sometimes do nothing. It's the most peaceful thing that somebody can do. And I think it's so undervalued, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was wonderful. I'm zen right now, so I'll wake up a little to ask. We did have some good questions come in, and so I'll start with those. I'll give you a few of those. Which one do I want to start with first? So this is kind of a general, what's the recommended number of hours to be considered a good night's sleep? I can answer that. You can answer that if you.
I'm going to say an answer that people will be like, really? But the answer is it's really individual. But I think the thing to look for is if you've been sleeping a certain way and it changes, that's the thing that I would start to look at. But do you have some information on that, Susan, about the recommended hours?
It is really 7 to 9, and people can fall anywhere in there. And again, it's also very individual, like what you just said, that if there's a change in your personal habit, that's when you need to take a look at. Some people don't have those consecutive hours and don't have much deep sleep. Some do have just a shorter amount of deep sleep, but not for a long period of time. So it can be all over the place. That said, it really, for all adults and men and women, 7 to 9 hours is what we need. So some people say, oh, they need less.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with if you need less and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm shortchanging, as long as you're functioning, right? As long as you're feeling rested and vital. If you're a 5-hour sleeper and you're not shortchanging yourself, I definitely think that's okay too. But I agree with you. The 7 to 9 seems to be the most standard amount of hours.
For our overall health, well-being, definitely. But to, a lot of what you were talking about is really tune into yourself and how are you doing and functioning during the day on whatever amount of sleep you're getting. And some people, so this comes up a lot too. Do you recommend napping? Is napping good, bad? I know where I stand on that. I want to hear your thoughts.
I'm a big fan of naps.
Me
I
too.
really am.
Yes,
For whatever length, I know people talk about cat naps. Often I will drop out unexpectedly for 10 minutes.
yep,
I
does a
think
world
if
of
you're
good.
right, if your body's saying sleep, and if you
There's a
can,
reason.
yeah. I know people get afraid, Susan, right? They get afraid that if they nap, they won't be able to sleep at night. But unless you're actively working on some of the sleep hygiene techniques, and again, I know the health coaches at Castle Connolly are a great resource for people to tap into. I believe that naps are our natural way of catching up and resting.
I agree. Can, be that superpower that we all need. Here's another one. So why don't men have sleep issues? So I just want to mention that one first. It was kind of funny. And that's just, I'm not sure where that information's coming from, because actually women supposedly get more sleep than men. Women suffer from insomnia at a higher rate, but both have, it's not gender specific having sleep issues, first of all. And in general, women, believe it or not, despite, what obviously the women with sleep issues think, men have kind of suffer from poor sleep more so than women.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've heard and known men who
Hormonal changes too, and the
that's
cortisol, the
right.
lower testosterone. And so it's not necessarily gender specific.
I
Go ahead.
agree. Oh no, I totally agree. And I agree with you about the hormones. There's a hormonal shifting and changing throughout the day. Again, I'm not a doctor. It's just from my own experience and talking to people, but yes, cortisol, adrenaline, all of those things, if they are taxed, are going to affect our sleep, whether we're men or women.
Correct. So that's a couple of questions come in about that a lot of people fall asleep and then they'll wake up, particularly during COVID or now in the news, it's like it plagues people, but they have nightmares. Nightmares are waking people. Or they're saying, they drift to sleep, but then things keep them awake. So can you help with that? I do believe it's related to cortisol in most instances and just the stress that we're still processing. Do you have any recommendations or help to get people back to sleep once they're awake in the middle of the night?
Well, I am, I know there's a lot of schools of thought out there. I know people say, oh, get up and move out of the bed. But I think that when we're in the bedroom, this is again only my perspective, that to do things because we're in that place that's safe and it's encouraging us to sleep. So there's some standard things that you can do. You can put something on that's very soothing. I've often, when I woken up or when I'm trying to fall asleep, I'll go to YouTube and there's some wonderful, they're called sleep hypnosis, but there's someone speaking in a very soothing tone of voice and allowing your mind. Here's the thing about rumination, which is what's occurring when people wake up, or one of the things is that you want to disrupt the rumination. You want to literally force your mind to focus on something else. And we think, oh, I'll just think of something else, but it can be very difficult to do when you're emotionally upset. So actually forcing yourself to put your attention and your ears and your ears mainly on something else will help to cause your mind to move away from that rumination. And I think addressing, for me personally, one of the things, and Susan, you know more about this than I do, but I addressed adrenal and cortisol issues in a very natural way, not on medication, by making sure I had enough vitamin C and potassium and sodium. So again, I don't want to give out medical advice, but I found that helped me with my cortisol, which was spiking due to stress.
Right. And then getting outside every day. There are those simple lifestyle habits that really make a huge difference. Being exposed to natural sunlight during the day, getting fresh air, getting exercise, those things help us process the stress and the stress hormones as well. And then,
Go ahead. And I'm going to add something on to what you were saying.
Okay, sorry about that. And I
No.
just want to say, in the middle of the night, something that does help me. So you just retraining our brains. Our minds are so powerful, and that ruminating, getting lost in all of those thoughts that bombard us. I like to do myself and recommend either mantra-based type of meditation and just simply breathing. Really, once you tune in, tap into your own breathing and taking those deep breaths, it does take your thoughts away from wherever they are, those negative thought, that bombard us in the middle of the night.
I agree. And I wanted to say, I said, mainly stay in bed, but if you are so agitated, then do get up and go into another room. Again, it'll disrupt and keep the lights low. And if you have, I'm all for whatever works. If you end up watching something on television, as long as it's not, CSI or Law and Order or something that's going to keep you up, but to watch something light so that your mind can again put its focus on something else. Or if you want to, you can play a computer game, something again that allows you, I know it's a blue light, but it's something that we have to do. Yeah. We have to do what we have to do.
And everybody's different. So there's no
Absolutely.
absolutes in that sense too. So true. One question here, how do you feel about over-the-counter sleep aids? You kind of already addressed that, but go ahead again.
Yeah, again, not giving medical advice. I feel that there are more natural choices, and maybe someone will say to me, hey, I've tried everything natural. And every once in a while, an over-the-counter sleep aid, again, you have to do what you have to do, but there are some side effects and some residual effects from those over-the-counter sleep aids. So I feel that the behavior, if some of these behavior things start to be addressed, again, it's not a miracle, it's going to take time and there's a process to it. If you can start working with your body instead of instantly giving it things to override the agitation. Exactly. It's natural ability. So you're going to hear me almost sound like I'm saying two things. If you are desperate for sleep, make the choice that's best for you. But in the meantime, try to choose things that are of the more natural ilk to help you ease into sleep.
And what we do during the day. So one question is also about the falling asleep. There are those who fall asleep fine and wake up, and then there are others who really have a lot of trouble falling asleep initially. And so this person says that she's so tired and can hardly wait to get into bed and just simply can't fall asleep. It becomes very frustrating despite doing things like a sound machine, diffuser. So I'll just give my 2 cents there very quickly, because it's more complicated than it's never one concrete thing, right? And that's where looking at your entire day, your overall lifestyle, all of your habits does matter, and setting yourself up for naturally drifting off to sleep. And so I want to comment on that because I've done several podcast episodes with various sleep experts, and really it's understanding that it's natural to sleep, and it is unnatural, right, to rely on medications or other things. And so I think a lot of it is just, allowing yourself or telling yourself that you can fall asleep, because people think that they can't. You hear that phrase like, I can't fall asleep. Of course you can. So I just want to put that out there as well, that really believing or knowing and understanding that, yes, you can fall asleep naturally. And then there's a lot leading up to it that,
that's right.
helps
you can heal your sleep. There's nothing wrong with you. You haven't done anything wrong.
Nothing's broken.
That you're struggling with sleep, meaning you might be trying all of these things and you're still struggling with sleep. It doesn't mean that that's a character flaw that, I told myself I should be able to sleep and I can't. It may require a bit more detective work, both on the body, mind, and spirit level of what's happening in the daytime. So on the physical level, getting the medical checkup, hormones, everything. On the mental level, what are you doing? Overgiving, overdoing. And on the physical level, are you pushing yourself too hard throughout the day? Are you not giving yourself those breaks?
When you said that about the breaks, they're just key. And a lot of people, I see this all the time, and it's hard to strike a balance right? For the
So
overdoing.
true.
And sometimes because we feel like, but we have, there's the but, right? And
It becomes, I have to say, when people say, okay, I'm going to do it, I'm going to take that 5-minute break, but I have to tell you, I doubt it'll work. I'm like, fine, you can doubt it. Try it anyway. It will feel artificial initially, but don't give up on that. It's like any learned skill. We have to try it and almost fake our way through it and just keep
Sure.
trying it and experiencing those little breaks. You are going to eventually start to feel the effect.
Mm-hmm. And don't talk yourself out of it. So do it. Just do it, as Nike
Yes.
says. Because even the 5 minutes makes a big difference. I love talking to you about this and just taking that time to, again, it's all about the body-mind connection with this, and spending more time listening to our bodies, really assessing, doing a self check-in is so beneficial in many, many ways, both for sleep and managing stress, the cortisol, because it's all tied together. There isn't a single person out there right now who isn't under more stress than usual.
So true. Remember the inability to sleep, from my perspective, it's one perspective, but it's an expression of something.
Yes.
Something is being expressed by the body and mind. And I might have
Mhm.
shared this with you before, Susan. It's not a phrase that I created, but it comes out of 12-step programs. And they say, when I'm going to switch out, or they say, when the universe wants to get your attention. So I'm going to switch out universe to say, when the body wants to get your attention, first it taps you on the shoulder, then
Okay.
it knocks on the door, and then it throws a brick through the window.
Yeah, it's true. I'm sorry. I
So
shouldn't laugh.
you're going
Yeah.
to probably be feeling something, "Oh, I'm kind of tired, but I'll keep going." And then it's going to get those symptoms I spoke about are going to amplify. And then something's going to happen, like losing your sleep or, dropping things. Your body and mind are trying to tell
More
you things
acute.
all the time.
Mhm.
Exactly. They're
Mhm.
your friends. Your body is your friend. It's your ally. And it's trying to tell you something. And it's just a matter of deciphering, with help from other people at times, what that is.
Right. I love that. Thank you. With your help. This is very helpful. People are saying that. So you talked about boundaries, and we have a few more minutes here. I was chuckling at the way this person said it. So can you, any more? I mean, you did talk about that, but that's a really tough thing for people, is setting these boundaries to not overgive and overdo. And she wrote, I think I have a problem with it. So if anything else comes to mind, that, simple techniques maybe, or saying no. A lot of people, that whole simple, like, learn how to say no, and that doesn't come naturally to a
It
lot of
doesn't.
overgivers.
There is that phrase, no is a complete sentence, but I understand that it's hard to say no. So it doesn't have to be no. It
Right.
can be, you could say whatever you feel, but this is hard for me to say, but I'm going to have to turn you down. I always think that sharing your emotional state
Yeah,
is a plus.
it's a huge plus.
It's a huge plus. I hate to turn you down, but I really don't have the time to give. I know you understand, or I can't really decide on that right now. My initial thought is no, but I'll text you later. You don't have to call them back and get talked into it again. But you can do practical things. Just because someone's texting you and asking you something doesn't mean you have to immediately respond. Sit with it. Sit with it. Does this work for me? What's the ripple effect? Ask yourself those questions. So sharing your emotional state and saying, that doesn't work for me. Not being available, not picking up the phone just because you have a phone and it's ringing, you're allowed to not pick it up or answer that text or answer that email until
Right.
you're clear. And saying, again, at work, it's hard to do sometimes, but to be able to go into whoever is giving you work and saying, I have to let you know my plate is full and I need your help in coming up with a solution about how to handle all the work. So inviting another person into the solution then is going to help you feel supported, and it signals to them that your plate is full.
I love that. I think that doesn't occur to people, to have that open discussion sometimes. Yeah, but one thing that I think we all experience now is a lack of a boundary. And I think that that's why I brought it up too. For me personally, I think for everybody with our smartphones, that we are being texted and called and emailed, and it's hard to set any sort of boundaries, but where we have control is in the how quickly we respond, how we respond and how quickly and all of that. So that's, and you just said that, and that is such a power, the power is back in our hands there. Just because somebody
Yes,
texts you doesn't mean that you have to engage in this moment
that's
if you really
right.
can't. Yeah.
I just give a quick example. One time I was working with someone who had a team of people that they were working with, and they were constantly being texted and they would answer. And I said,
Yeah.
okay, so the responsibility is on you. And this person said, well, what if it's an emergency? And I said, how about this? How about if you say to your team, I'm not available unless it's an emergency. Here's what I define as an emergency. So they know exactly what and how and when they can reach you. I also worked with somebody
So helpful.
Right, that they were on
Mhm.
site in an office and they
Mhm.
felt uncomfortable shutting their door. They thought, oh, I should be available to people. And I thought, and we talked about it, you need to be available to yourself as well. You're allowed
Right.
to shut your door.
You are allowed to shut your
Minutes.
door. Yeah.
Start with
People,
5.
people need
Again,
to
the
be
5
told.
minute.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Back, I hope everybody starts to apply that 5 minutes a day. Absolutely. So probably time for one more question. And so you talked about depression and various things, but so many people are suffering from anxiety and various levels of anxiety. Do you think that, or can anxiety affect sleep apnea?
That's really
I'm not,
interesting.
yeah, it is. Yeah, that's one of the questions. And
Well, let's look at the things that happen out of anxiety, which then I would think would lead to sleep apnea. So let's say I'm anxious, so I'm going to self-soothe. Not all sleep apnea is it comes from self-soothe. I'm going to drink a little bit more alcohol because I'm stressed and I'm anxious, or I'm going to eat more heavy carbohydrate laden foods, simple sugars because I'm stressed, because I'm just trying to take care of myself. So eventually, if you're drinking or eating close to bedtime, that can affect sleep apnea, and it can cause, that's weighing on your system, and those
absolutely.
substances, right?
Hmm.
They affect. But for sleep apnea, again, I'm not an expert. I do believe that there are ways to address it. I do think anxiety can be connected because you're not dropping off in the way that you need to be. And there might be activities or things that you're doing to self-soothe, which could exacerbate. I was trying to think if I had that correct. Exacerbate
Yes.
sleep apnea. Do you have any thoughts on it, Susan?
Well, I was just thinking that too. Anxiety changes how we breathe, period. Shallow breathing versus long, deep breathing. So when you become aware of, really getting caught up in some anxious thoughts in particular, that's, I resort back to the deep breathing, relaxation, breathing techniques. And they really are helpful in the middle of the night. It's, if you can tell yourself, one thing I say, and this I hope resonates with most people, if you can tell yourself, I am safe, all is well, and just focus on, when I mentioned kind of mantra, but just repeating that sort of, calming thought, I am safe, all is well, and taking as you breathe in and out. And this is for people with anxiety at all times of the day during sleep, but it tends to haunt us in the middle of the night. I hope that helps, because that does help me. And I tell my children too, who there's a lot of anxiety all around. And I say, you are safe and all is well, and just focus on that and tell yourself that. And, I hope that helps calm the anxiety.
I love those phrases, and I really appreciate them. And I think that these are things that we cultivate, right? Maybe
Right.
those phrases might not help you instantly, or maybe the 5 minutes, like I said, a day might not help you instantly. But what we're doing is cultivating a habit, a healthy habit,
Yes.
helping the body. And we are allowed to learn how to do these things. We don't have to be failures if they don't happen immediately. We're working with who we are, and we need time to learn these things and to integrate them. And that's perfectly normal.
I love that. There is no failing at sleep. you
Right.
you are allowed. Oh, Karol, thank you. We could continue. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I got some wonderful feedback here. I'll share with you. So just so that we end on time, I do want to give you a chance to remind people about that gift. Thank you for sharing that gift, speaking of the 5 minutes. So I wanted to end with a reminder to have people really take advantage of that offer. Anything else, Karol, that you want to share with participants tonight?
I just would, I think Julia's putting the gift either into the chat, or you certainly can get it off of my website. I know you're going to send it out. I think this comes from my training and my spiritual orientation is that to have compassion for what you're going through now in terms of sleep and what you're going through in terms of what's happening in life. The more compassionate we are, which doesn't mean passivity, it just means compassion, the more we can take actions to help ourselves feel the best possible. And I think that's an important prescription for helping people. Compassion.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for saying that. That's a great way to close a wonderful first webinar of the year. And thank you again, Karol, for being here.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. And I know that you would come back at some point. So again, thank you. And I didn't say this, but Karol was on my podcast with me recently. We'll put that in the follow-up with the recording that will go out to all members as well. So, because I just love talking with you, Karol. And again, thank you.
Feel the same. We could talk for hours.
I know. Oh, wonderful. Okay, well, I hope everybody has a fabulous evening. Happy New Year, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.